I want to thank again our host every week, Yossi Pugach. And Dafka, tonight, we're going to dedicate the SHIUR in memory of his father, Zichrono Livracha, Aryeh ben Yosef, whose 11th yortzeit is coming up. I want to mention a couple of other yortzeits as well for some of our regular attenders who maybe, I never really have the time to look at who's on. I'm too busy doing the SHIUR, but some of our regulars I know I see afterwards, I look at the list. So I want to mention Reva Friedman's mother-in-law, also having a yortzeit, Hinda Rivka Bat Menachem Mendel, and Rochelle Gossett's father, Usher Ansel Pilser, and Janice Weinreb's mother, Rose Cohn, Ita Rezel Bat Aryeh Lev HaKohen, and also Dr. Helena Igra in memory of Shendla Riva Bat David Vachana. So all of them joining us in spirit, and their neshamot should have an aliyah. So we're going to, in commemoration of the upcoming Tisha B'Av, we're going to spend some time with this in-depth look at one of the most famous stories in the Gemara. Some of you may have heard this before. It always bears repeating. I always learn it every year, either on Tisha B'Av or before Tisha B'Av. The story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, we'll get there in a moment. And if you know it and have heard it, you may hear some things today that you've not heard before. The Gemara, the Chazal make a very dramatic statement that says he or whoever, we can wait. Yossi, let's wait to share the screen just if we can for a couple of minutes. Then I'll tell you when, if you don't mind. Thank you. So they make a statement, one who does not rebuild the Beit HaMikdash in his or her lifetime is considered as if he or she had destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. This is a very dramatic statement, in a sense, holding us accountable for the non-rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. I mean, we didn't destroy it. We're not Romans, Babylonians. We were not the ones living at the time that it was destroyed. So this is a very puzzling, severe indictment. But two things that I think come out of this dramatic statement is that we have the power to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. That is, ultimately, it's in our hands. This generation, more than any other in 2,000 years, some people have this belief that says, oh no, the Beit HaMikdash is just going to magically appear. And there's even, some references to a Beit HaMikdash Shel Mala and Beit HaMikdash Shel Mata. There's a heavenly Beit Mikdash that will just somehow come down in Jerusalem and it will magically appear. But I subscribe, along with many others, to the idea that that's not what's going to happen. That obviously Hashem is going to grant us the allowance to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, but we're going to do the building. After all, Shlomo HaMelech built, and many others combined to build the first Beit HaMikdash, and Ezra and Nehemiah did the second Beit HaMikdash. Why should we be any different and just passively stand by and watch as it's built for us? And I suggest that this statement is telling us we do have the power to rebuild it. Obviously, we have to use our power of free choice, our gifts and strengths, and partner with God in order to do it. The other thing that this statement is telling us is that if we perpetuate those sins which caused the Beit HaMikdash to be destroyed twice, then in a sense, we are preventing it from being rebuilt, because until we remove that stain and that symptom of sin that caused it, but in both cases, to be destroyed, but especially in the case of the second Beit HaMikdash, then we are indeed somewhat responsible. So we know the famous Gemara in Yuma. Everyone knows this. This is really today very trendy to talk about. That the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of the three cardinal sins of immorality, murder or violence, and idolatry. But in the second Beit HaMikdash, says the Gemara, where we were engaged in mitzvot, where we practiced chesed. Why was it destroyed? Because of sinat chinam. This very complex, difficult to understand condition of what's usually translated as baseless hatred, which is a difficult thing to understand, that, to hate someone for no reason at all. But this apparently was rampant in the Jerusalem of the days of the second Beit HaMikdash. So God opened the door, so to speak, for the Romans to destroy it. Not that we were guiltless, but clearly we are not imposed upon from the outside. What happens to us is a function of our own behavior. And the Gemara brings to us a story that is meant to epitomize this sin of sinat chinam. So we should learn this story, and so we should correct this ill and this malady that afflicts us, that is preventing the Beit HaMikdash from being rebuilt and a final redemption coming. So now I'm going to ask Yossi to please share the screen with the story. And we're going to go into a short story. I'll give you the cut to the chase. It doesn't have a happy ending, but it's a story that is very profound. It takes place in the tractate of Gittin, and we'll comment on that later, why that's important. And it begins with a very bold statement. Akamtza, and you see it there in the yellow, Akamtza ubar kamtza charuv Yerushalayim. Jerusalem was destroyed because of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza. We'll see who they are in a moment. Dahahu Gavra, there was a man, Derachme Kamtza, who was friends with Kamtza, Ubaldevave Bar Kamtza, and he was an enemy or involved in a dispute with Bar Kamtza. Avad Seudata, he made a grand banquet. And as we'll see from the story, this was a real wingding. All the glitterati of Jerusalem were there. And Amarle Lishameh, he said to his helper, or perhaps his manservant, Zil aite li kamtza, go and bring to this party kamtza. Now in those days, this was pre-email, it was pre-Twitter, it was pre-regular mail. If you wanted somebody to get a hold of somebody, you went right to them. So says the host, we'll call him, bring Kamtza, who was his friend. But unfortunately, his servant is a bit of a shlemazel. Azal ite le bar Kamtza. He doesn't bring Kamsa, he brings Bar Kamsa. Think of it as Goldberg and Goldberger. All you have to do is add, the burr, like you have here, or the and you confuse the names. And so he confused the names and brought the wrong person to the party. Well, all heck is going to break loose now. Asa ashkeche dahabe yativ. The host sees that Bar Kamtza is sitting there. Amarle, and he says, in a very cryptic statement that we'll return to, Michte, let's see, Hahu Gavra, Baldevava to Hahu Gavra. Who? That man is the enemy of that man. And the host, seeing Bar Kamtza, gets apparently somewhat enraged and says, Ma bain hacha, what are you doing here? Kum, get up, puk, and get out. You don't belong here. You weren't meant to be invited. Quite stunned by this, Amar le, says Bar Kamsa to the host, Hoil va'atai, since I'm here already, rather than ignominiously throw me out in front of all these honored people, Shvakin, let me stay. V'havni lach demei madachilna v'shatina. I will pay for everything I eat and drink. It won't cost you a drachma. I'll pay for everything. And we continue. Amar le lo, says the host, no, I don't want you here. Get out. Amar le, says Bar Kamsa, I'll sweeten the pot. Yahavni lach demei palga desudatayich. I'll give you half the cost of this party. I'll pay for half the cost. How can you turn that down? Amar le lo, says the host, no. I don't accept your offer. I want you out. Amar le, so Bar Kamsa has one more offer to make. And you can guess what that is. Yahavni lach demei kula sudatayich. I will pay for the whole darn party. Won't cost you a penny. Just don't kick me out. But it is to no avail. Amar le, says the host, lo, no. Nakte biyade. He grabs him with his hands. Va'ukme, lifts him up. Va'afke, and throws him out. Picture the Old West, somebody being tossed out of the saloon on his you-know-what. And that's what happens to Bar Kamsa. Amar, when he gets up and dusts himself off, he says, Hoil v'have yatve rabbanan v'lo machube. Since the rabbis were sitting at this banquet and saw what happened and did nothing to stop it, shmamina kanich lehu. It's clear that they approved of what was done to me. And so, says Bar Kamsa, they're messing with the wrong guy. I will have my revenge. And he has a plan. Aizel ichel behu kurza bemalcha. He starts a rumor that the Jews are going to rebel against the Roman authorities. And the Romans always obsessively paranoid about rebellion in their ranks, because if one group of people or country rebels, the whole empire could fall apart. And he doesn't just start a rumor. Azil Amrle LeKesar, he goes and meets with the Caesar. Some, by the way, want to say that this was Nero, but that's another story. And apparently Bar Kamsa is well connected. This is not a guy who is, a schlepper. He can get an audience with the Caesar. And he says to him, Mordu Bach Yehudai, Caesar, the Jews are planning to rebel against you. Amarle, says the Caesar, Mi Omar, who says? Amarle, says Bar Kamsa, here's what to do to see how the Jews feel about you. Shadar lahu kurbana, send a offering, a sacrifice to be brought in the Beit HaMikdash. And by the way, it was permissible for non-Jews to sponsor an offering. I mean, they didn't, of course, just like any other Jew, they didn't actually, do the practical slaughtering and all the other ritual, but they could bring an offering. Says Bar Kamsa, you send an offering, chazit imakarvin le, and let's see if the Jews will accept your offering. Okay, that sounds reasonable, but Bar Kamsa is a very clever person. And as we said, he has a plan. Azul Shadar bidei eglet talasa. First, he goes out and he gets a choice calf, a beautiful calf, fitting an emperor or a Caesar. But bahari dekaate shada be'muma. He carefully makes a slight little blemish in this calf. And that the animals offered in the Beit HaMikdash had to be without blemish. Where did he put the blemish? Beniv Svatayim, in its lip, so it could barely be noticed. Va'amrele bedukin sheba'ayin duchta, that it was someone to say a slight nick in the eyelid. Diladidan havamuma. For us, the Jews, people running the Beit HaMikdash, it was indeed, it qualified as a blemish. Uladideu lav mumahu. But to the naked eye, to the Romans, it didn't look like anything was wrong. And of course, this is his plan. When the Jews will reject this offering, it will be a sign to the Romans. They really do so detest the Romans that they won't let them bring an offering, and indeed a sign that they're planning a rebellion. Well, the rabbis have to figure out what can be done here. And apparently the rabbis had significant power because we don't see anybody else meeting. So they have a plan. Savara banan lekrove. They say, people, let's find a loophole.
You're good inside for sure.
You've got to mute.
Make it a great day.
Let's accept the offering anyway. Mishum shalom malchut, because of peace. We don't want the Romans to rise up against us. So let's make an exception and let's bring the offering. Amar lahu Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas, stands up one rabbi, Rabbi Zachariah, and he nixes this. Yomru balei mumin krovin legabe misbeach. What? You're going to bring a blemished animal so that people will say it's permissible to bring a blemished animal on the altar of the Beit HaMikdash? Okay, the rabbis are taken aback, and so let's go to plan B. Savur lemiktale. Let's kill Bar Kamsa, the lo lezel velema, and then he'll stop his, incitement against us. And if he's out of the picture, then the dust will settle and everything will be okay somehow. But Amr lahu Rabbi Zachariah, stands up again, this Rabbi Zachariah, and says to the group, what? Yomru matil mum bekadashim yarog. People will say, just because someone puts a blemish in a calf, they deserve the death penalty. And he basically chills them, into nixing this plan too. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, rises the great Rabbi Yochanan and says, An v'tanuto shel Rabbi Zachariah ben Akulas, the supposed humility of Rabbi Zachariah, hachriva et beitenu, destroyed our house, the Beit HaMikdash, v'starfa hechalenu, and burnt our sanctuary, v'higlitanu me'artzenu, and caused us to be exiled from our land. And as the story goes on, and in the interest of time, I'll shorten it for you. You see here that it mentions Nero, calls him Neron. But from this, he gets the idea that the Jews are indeed rebelling. He mounts the Roman forces against Jerusalem. They find a secret way into the walls. And indeed, Jerusalem, and there's even a sign from heaven that he can go ahead, he'll be successful in putting down this insurrection or proposed insurrection, and thus Jerusalem is destroyed. This is the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, and it's complex. Let's start with a little detective work. Who is the villain in this story? If you want to, you can put in the chat. There are 6 possible individuals who we might blame for what happened in this story. Who are they? Who are the 6? Okay. Emre says Kamsa. Very interesting. Okay, who else? Bar Kamsa, yes. He's the one that goes to the Caesar. Okay. Naomi says the host, that would be my first guess. He's the one that threw out Bar Kamsa. Anyone else? The servant, the Shlemiel, the Shlemazel. He didn't deliver the letter, the invitation to the right person. Okay, the rabbis, says Alexa. Yes. After all, they didn't stop it. Okay. So who else? I mean, who did Rabbi Yochanan say was responsible? He says that was Rab Zachariah ben Avkulis. So all of these are reasonable guesses, but there's some questions about this. First of all, yes, SD says everyone. Well, we're jumping the gun to that for a second, but let's dissect this a bit. I would have said the first person, I would have said the host. He's the one who started this all by kicking out Bar Kamsa. But here's the question for you. If the host is really the villain of the story, what does not make sense? Now we have 50 people here, so somebody will come on. What does not make sense? If the host is responsible, then what is missing? I gave you a hint there. His name. Thank you, Lydia. His name is not there. He's just called Hahu Gavra. If he's responsible, then why isn't his name mentioned? Other people have their name mentioned in the story, and you read this for 2,000 and more years and castigate those people, but the host, no. Here's another question. Somebody said before that, well, how does the story begin? Who did the Gemara blame? You see, Rav Yochanan in the end blames Rav Zachariah, but who does the Gemara blame in the beginning? Remember the beginning of the story? How did it start? No, how did it start? Who was blamed? It says, Akamsa ubar Kamsa. Now you should be thinking to yourself, Bar Kamsa, I understand. After all, he's the one who incited the Romans against us. But what about Kamsa? He never even made it to the party. He doesn't even know that there was a party. He never got his invitation. Why should he be blamed? He was at home. He probably went to sleep early. Maybe, he read the scroll and had some wine, went to bed. He never even knew about this. So why is he being blamed? Let's try to answer these questions and come back. So, yeah, Mark and Badana, you're on the right track there. Let's look at a cryptic phrase. When the host sees Bar Kamsa, he says this phrase, Hahu Gavra Bal Devava Dahu Gavra. This man is the enemy of that man. He doesn't say, that's my enemy. He just says that here is someone who is the enemy of somebody else. And he says Mikhdei. Mikhdei means let's analyze this. Let's think about this. The implication is that perhaps this host has no personal grievance with Bar Kamsa. His only gripe or grudge against Bar Kamsa is what? Is that Bar Kamsa is the enemy of Kamsa. And so his reasoning is, well, the enemy of my friend is also my enemy, and therefore I have to throw him out. How will it look when my friend Kamsa finds out that I allowed his enemy to be there? In a sense, the Gemara is intimating that everyone is sucked into this dispute. There must have been, we don't know what it was, there must have been some famous or infamous dispute going on in Jerusalem. And this is just an example of what happened when the host feels he must take sides. I suggest that Kamsa and Bar Kamsa may very well not be their real names. What does Kamsa mean? Now, we have a phrase in Hebrew that I'm sure you've heard of, a kamtsan. What is a kamtsan? Anybody? Write it in the chat. What is a kamtsan?
Tight-fisted.
Okay, tight-fisted or a cheapskate. The derivation of it is that in the Beit HaMikdash, and this also relates, again, the whole story revolves around the Beit HaMikdash and its destruction. In the Beit HaMikdash, there was an offering that required flour. How much flour? The Kohen put his hand into the barrel of flour and he made a fist. And the amount of flour that was in his fist, that's the amount of flour that was necessary for the offering. So we connect the word kamsa. Basically, it's a measurement. It means a fistful with the word fist. Do you see the image? Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, both of them with an upraised fist. Not the symbol of peace, the open hand, but the fist, indicating that everyone is at everybody else's throat with their fist raised high. Some have even suggested, what is the literal meaning of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa? What does a bar mitzvah mean? What is a bar? Not like we say the joke, too much bar, not enough mitzvah at the party, but what does it mean? What does Kamsa and Bar Kamsa perhaps mean literally? What does bar mean? What? Son, thank you. Bar means like the son of the commandments. So perhaps what we're being told here is this is Kamsa and his son. Kamsa, the fight is so bad. The enmity between people is so bad that even fathers and sons are fighting with each other. And so the host isn't named because, as we said before, somebody said, it's not really important who the host is. The host is every man. That this is rampant now in what's going on in Jerusalem and why God feels that we have to tear down this society and build it again somehow, because it's just not right. And as Esty says, and we'll come to that, we'll come to Esty's comment about shaming a person is like murder. I will tell you at the end of the story that the Gemara later concludes, and you probably could have guessed this, who does the Gemara name as the primary villain? The rabbis. When all else fails, blame the rabbis. But it says the Gemara that shaming a person is one of the worst things you can do to them. And when we look at this story and we ask, why did the Gemara present it? It was to tell us that if you want to know why Jerusalem was destroyed and why it's not being rebuilt, because the sinat chinam, which involves shaming people, which involves humiliating people and even hating them, even when you have nothing against them, and you're sucked into this and you hate them for no reason. How often did we hear previously, certainly for Americans, you like Trump, I hate you. Why? You're not entitled to your opinion? Is that a reason? Or it could be vice versa. It could be Biden, it could be Bennett, it could be Bibi. They seem to all have B names for some reason. So it's seeking any excuse to distance yourself and alienate yourself from someone and cast aspersions on them. I want to add to this last bit about the rabbis trying to find a way. I told this story to a class of students yesterday, and one of them made a very good statement and asked me, why didn't the rabbis go to the Caesar and say, this is the trick being perpetrated on you right now, that this Bar Kamsa put a blemish in the calf and you don't see it, and he's trying to, incite against us. The rabbis failed in that task too. Maybe they could have. And here they have a meeting. It must have been a high-level meeting as to what to do. I mean, destruction is staring them in the face, and they can't come up with any plan. They fail miserably. And if you look at the wording, when Rav Zechariah challenges them and basically knocks down each of their two propositions, he uses the phrase and says, it's not necessarily because it's wrong, but he says, Yomru, in both cases. What will the people say? In other words, the rabbis are scared. I don't want to be known as someone who is so lenient that I allowed a offering to be brought in the temple that was blemished. What will people say about me? How will I get a shidduch for my daughter? And the same thing is true the other way. I don't want to be so extreme to say that you can just go out and kill someone and kill Bar Kamsa because he invalidated an offering. They're so timid and so worried about what anyone else will say, whether it's to the side of leniency or to the side of stringency, that they're frozen. They don't know what to do. There's no leadership. There's nobody standing up and saying, this can't go on. They sat there. They did nothing. Bar Kamsa, in a sense, was right. But his feud with Kamsa, and that's why they're both mentioned in the beginning, whether Kamsa was there or not, he was part of this feud. And that feud was fueling such anger and hatred and acrimony that Hashem looks down and he says, this is the society that I want to carry my name and come and bring offerings in the Beit HaMikdash? No. It's not. Again, the deeper idea is that, as we said, everyone contributes to this scenario because, in a sense, everyone is to blame. The rabbis are not, the Kamsa and Bar Kamsa are fighting, and the host is taking sides, and everyone else is, and the rabbis aren't doing anything, and they're ineffectual. This is the idea how we started, that the Gemara is saying, if you don't fix those problems, if you don't stop the acrimony between Jews, not for any personal reason that you have to resent them, but for some foolish or made-up reason, if you don't somehow bring forth leaders who can educate and stimulate and raise the level of the people to where they are practicing respect and camaraderie between one another, then you need to go into exile. Then the Beit HaMikdash, which is meant to be a place of peace, cannot coincide with the way you're acting. So the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash really means the rebuilding of Jewish society. When we accomplish that, the rest will take care of itself. God will open the doors, and we'll have the means on a physical level to rebuild the actual building. That comes later. First, you build the society, then you build the bricks and the mortar and the stone and the edifices. But if you're not ready for that, if you're still locked into the Kamsa Bar Kamsa syndrome, then you haven't done enough to cause the Beit HaMikdash to be rebuilt. It's tall order, and I'm sorry to say that as we look at our society, there is a tremendous amount of infighting on many different levels, whether it's political, whether it's Ashkenazi, Sephardi, whether it's religious, non-religious. You pick your poison. But there's a lot of work to be done. So although we have built a phenomenal country and built a phenomenal Yerushalayim, perhaps more grand than it ever was, Tisha B'Av is still very, very much necessary, because the heart of our struggle is rebuilding the society, not so much rebuilding the building. And that's our task, and that's something to think about as we head into another Tisha B'Av, and hopefully the last one someday, as it was when we, in the 400 years when the second Beit HaMikdash existed, and Tisha B'Av was actually a festive day. Bezrat Hashem, we'll get back to that. We'll rebuild the society, rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, and we will return Tisha B'Av to be not a black fast, but a day of celebration. B'mhera v'yameinu, amen. Okay, if we want to take a moment to unmute yourself and make a comment. Again, I hope that in heaven, the neshamot that we dedicated are listening, and they'll certainly be a melitz yosher, a good intercessor for us in heaven. So if anybody has a comment, you can make it. Yes, keep it brief, but make it.
Very quickly, whenever I think of the stories, like what you were saying, I think there's this chain, why there's so many different events of the story is that each part of the chain added something worse. When I think of how Bar Kamsa was shamed, but look at the vengeance he wreaked to try to destroy the rabbi. He's lost his faith in the rabbis and therefore lost his faith in everything. That is, in a way, if you take it as a story, from a literary point of view, that's the turning point.
But he's no hero either. Tal,
there are no heroes in this story at all.
No.
But I always feel so shocked that, and then you have to ask yourself, maybe that's why he was the enemy, because this is how he behaved when he was thwarted, and you said he had influence and power. But the whole story is a chain of terrible events.
Right. Thank you. Tal, what do you want to say?
I want to ask you, rabbis are very, very intellectual people. Obviously, they could have blamed Bar Kamsa for trying to kill all the Jews, not putting a blemish in the calf. Why are they not trying to find a way to exile him from the community? Why do they not think of alternative ways that were known to them?
Yeah, because the same reason, just like they said they couldn't kill him for what he did, they couldn't exile him either. Exile in many ways is a fate worse than death. But yeah, the rabbis should have been more creative. And that is a problem in our society, that you have to look, in many ways, halacha is a search for loopholes. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no reason or any logic in seeking to be as extreme as possible. That's not the Judaism that the Gemara professes. The Talmud is filled with ways of thinking how to solve problems so that people can live normally. Any other comments? Okay, if not, then I wish you all at Tzom Kal. Have a meaningful fast. We will not be meeting again until after Bein Hazmanim, Bezrat Hashem, Parshat Shoftim. So we will be on break for 3 weeks, I think it is. And then we'll send out a note then in the Parsha sheet, and also if anybody, whoever's on the WhatsApp list, and God willing, we'll meet again then. So enjoy the summer, stay cool, and stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you in a few weeks.